Yo, what's going on, y'all? Welcome back to another episode of hashtag CB99 Talk, some combo breaker 99. And I'm back with another boxing episode for y'all. And today's show is going to be more welterweight themed. Got a few topics I want to discuss. It's not going to be a long show, but I feel like, these are some major fights that's coming up, as well as a potential fight that could really put a certain welterweight champion back into the good graces with a lot of boxing fans as far as, his reputation, I just want to go in on these topics. I feel like, the welterweight division, like I always say, got a lot of talent, but, there's still a lot of matches that, that seem to take a long time to really come to fruition. It seems like we're really having to wait for so many great matches whenever you got a lot of great talent. It feels like a lot of these fights being put on pause right now. But the way things are looking, hopefully we start to really get these matches that are coming up. So man. First topic I want to talk about is Shawn Porter. Shawn Porter, as you know, I just found this out yesterday that he is now the number one contender for Terrence Crawford's WBO belt. So, my main question is, do you really think that's going to help push this Crawford Porter fight? Putting him in that number one position, is that really going to help make this fight happen? Because this is a fight, like I said, it could really put Terrence Crawford back into that realm where a lot of people are going to say, okay, he's stepping his game up now, as far as his opponent selection. So, I want to go in on that, as well as Ugas returning this Sunday against Ramos. He's going to be this is actually his title shot, man. This is his main title shot for the WBA, I think a regular belt, one of those WBA belts. But with this fight here, if he wins it, it's going to build his stock up and put him into that realm with the other champions. And, whenever he gets into that realm, nobody can turn him down, because, Ugas, he's one of those guys who's worked real hard and, he's trying to get into that realm and, this is it, so I'm happy for him. So we'll talk about that fight and I'll do my prediction on that as well. And last topic is discussing, November 21st, again, Errol Spence versus Danny Garcia. I just want to talk a little bit about what Danny Garcia said as far as, Errol not using the accident as an excuse. Him having more skill and more power and more of an IQ than Errol Spence. I just want to talk about all of that. As far as, Danny Garcia and his timing as well. Not timing in the ring, but as far as his timing, to challenge Errol Spence Jr., what does that also say about him as a fighter? So we're going to talk about that too, man. But man, just been kind of busy. So I want to drop this episode as well as, talk some women's MMA in my, next segment for y'all, because I know y'all fans are different. The boxing fans are different than the women's MMA fans. So, I've been trying to separate them. But man, jumping back up here, like I said yesterday, I found out that Shawn Porter, he's now the number one contender for Terrence Crawford's WBO belt. And to me and all the hardcore fans, of course, this is good news. Terrence Crawford, he's been a fighter that a lot of people always held him high in high regard as far as the number one pound for pound fighter in the world. I have as well. I always feel like Terrence Crawford is that number one guy, for the past, I say 2.5 years, almost 3 years. But of course, to keep that status, you got to keep it pumping. You got to keep it pumping as far as your opponents. Skills can only take you so far. And I feel like when Terrence was dominating and winning championships in his the lower divisions he was in, he was taking on challenges, from the 130, 135 to 140. And, 140, he unified the whole division. At the same time, he was showcasing great skill. So it was like, okay, he's got a little bit of everything. So that's why I know this guy, to me, and a lot of other people, he is considered number one pound for pound. But since, 2018, since moving up to beat Jeff Horn for his belt, the WBO belt, the opponent selection kind of changed, and that's why a lot of people have been harder on him, because they're feeling like, okay, he came up to the welterweight division where, it's nothing but sharks, it's nothing but talent, so they're feeling at some point you gotta get on a collision course with some of these guys. Of course, the Jeff Horn fight was a perfect it was a perfect entry into the welterweight division. But then after that, it's like, okay, from there, we just got to take heads. We got to take these top level fighters. But when that wasn't happening, it kind of changed a lot of people's tune and, outlook about outlook about Bud Crawford. So, you know, his stock has kind of dropped with a lot of people, and for, like I said, for a good reason. He still showcases that great skill, but now the opponent selections kind of changed. Now that you have these opponents and you don't really have any of these names like Thurmans, the Pacquiaos, the Garcias or the Spences or the Ugases, you don't have any of these names on your resume yet. It's really hard to argue as that number one pound for pound guy, but now that you have a guy like Shawn Porter, a guy who's faced just about everybody in the welterweight division, showcasing some interest in a Terrence Crawford fight, you got to feel like, hey, this is a fight that Terrence should feel like he needs. Same with Bob Arum. Bob Arum is his promoter, so it seems like being his promoter, you would want your fighter to always shine. And that's one of the things I feel like a lot of people think about Bob, is that he's kind of like holding Bud back from shining, as far as really, really dominating the welterweight division like he should, So now that Shawn Porter has put himself in a position as the number one contender for that WBO belt, this is a blessing in disguise for them. This is a blessing, man. So I think they need to take it. And one of the things I have to say, really have to ask y'all is, now that he is that number one contender, do you really feel like this fight is going to happen? Will Porter get his match against Terrence Crawford, the match that everybody wants? I mean, I'm hoping that it does happen, but I'm still kind of like 50-50 on this one, because just because you're the number one contender doesn't always mean that you'll get that fight. There's a certain thing called step aside money. We never know how big the checks are with step aside money. So that could be put out there to Shawn Porter. So it could be like, oh, that might be another holdup. And you've also seen the past where number one contenders don't necessarily get their shot. As long as like that champion fights somebody in that top 5 or top 10 in their mandatories, and they'll kind of let it go. And also, like, if I remember correctly, just like a few months ago, I want to say back in like February, March, I think I want to say even back in like April or May, Danny Garcia was actually the number one contender for the WBO belt, and you saw how that turned out. A Bud fight never happened. Instead, it was like they said that either side again here said, they either said that Danny Garcia had turned down the offer or outpriced himself, or it was the other way around, and instead Amir Khan got the fight. So being the number one contender doesn't really necessarily mean that the fight is going to happen. That's why I'm really still kind of on the fence about Shawn Porter being the number one contender is really going to make this fight. Because again, whenever I saw Garcia as that number one contender, I was like, okay, now they're really pushing that. But then when that offer was made and they refused it, and then the Amir Khan fight happened, I was just like, okay, we might as well kiss the Danny fight goodbye. And again, that just kind of shows you like the WBO is more so the top ranked belt. I mean, you can kind of see it throughout the years. It's more the top ranked ESPN belt, because now you kind of see that Bob Arum is kind of pushing this one. Okay, we can kind of defend whoever we want. We don't necessarily have to go by the number one ranking. So again, that's another reason that I'm starting to doubt that this Shawn Porter fight could happen, And so to me, yeah, I'm 50-50, but let me know in the comment section what y'all think. Another thing I want to ask y'all is about this fight being avoided. Do you think it's Bob or do you think it's Bud that's really avoiding this fight? And why would they avoid this fight? I mean, to me, Terrence Crawford, he's never seemed like a guy that would duck anybody. He doesn't seem like that type of guy that has fear in his heart, that feels like, oh man, I'm worried about what this guy could do to me, or I'm worried about him messing up my chances. I could kind of see Bob protecting him a little bit more, as far as, wanting to get as much money out of a champion as he can, more more reward and less risk. Less risk, more reward. That's the old saying I've been hearing in boxing, especially with certain managers and promoters. You've seen it throughout the years since the 80s, 90s, and on back. You kind of protect your champion and get as much money out of them as you can. And then after that, that's it. You just keep them blocked out from facing all the other sharks, but you keep them on a certain pedestal where they can do whatever they want without getting hurt. So I could see Bob maybe wanting to avoid this fight more because he probably feels like Shawn Porter has that style that could really damage Bud's stock. But Bud, on the other hand, like I said, like I don't think he is the one ducking this fight. And if he was, I don't really think he would be ducking it because of Porter's style. One of the things I want to ask y'all too is like, do you think he could be avoiding any kind of serious risk to avoid messing up the chances of the big fight with Errol Spence? I think that could be possible too. We've seen that in the past, where a guy who's on to a bigger fight, he wants to continue to just kind of take the soft touches until he gets to the big fight because he wants to avoid, taking on a big risk. He wants to avoid putting his major fight in jeopardy. He doesn't want to mess up that chance. But to me, it's like, that's not a good idea either. I like a champion that can take on all comers and take that hard road up, because that's what a real fighter does. I think you'll still be judged off of that. Like, say if Bud continues to take these fights and then gets the Errol Spence fight, I think it's still going to kind of knock his stock. Whereas on this side, you got Errol, who is fighting the tougher fights, coming off, so let's say he beats Danny Garcia, then goes into another fight with a Manny or Ugas to get that WBA belt. Then he takes 3 belts while Bud only has 1. And then they finally meet head to head in like 2021 or 2022. Then a lot of people feel like Errol's a better fighter, because he fought the harder road and the better champions. You know what I mean? So you got to kind of look at it that way too. Like, let's say Bud, is avoiding other risk, but it'll still kind of have people gauge you as far as, okay, he's a guy who doesn't want to take a chance. And this is boxing. We want to see a guy take risks. We want to see the best fight the best. So that's not a good idea either, but I think it could be possible. That'd be the only reason why I see Bud avoiding like a Thurman or a Shawn Porter fight. Because I mean, when it comes to the Manny fight, everybody's for the Manny fight, whether it is Errol or Bud. Everybody's for that fight because it's big risk, but it's also big reward. You know what I mean? Like that's why you think Keith Thurman took that fight before he took this Spence fight, because he knew that he was going to get paid. So when he got paid, he took an L. Thurman seems fine to me. He doesn't seem broken and shook. But you got to think somebody like Terrence Crawford, if he took on a Shawn Porter and lost, it might be a little bit more damaging psychologically, because he's going to be like, damn, I messed up my stock for a bigger payday. So you got to look at it in that way too. So I kind of think that if he was to be avoiding the Shawn Porter fight, it would be because he doesn't want to mess up his Spence or Pacquiao chances, But if you're looking at Bob, I think Bob would be the one that to protect him. Like I said, I don't know, but that's just kind of what it seemed like over the past 2 years since, Terrence Crawford has stepped into the welterweight division. But another key point, like I said, I just want to make about this fight, why it really needs to happen, why they really need to make this fight, even on Terrence Crawford's side, is because Shawn Porter is really a much needed opponent for Terrence, and I'm talking about resume wise, legacy wise, and reputation wise in the fight game. And I'm making that known in the fight game is because that's how you want to get your respect. Now, outside of the ring, you might not care what other people think, of course. Like his personal life, I don't care about Terrence Crawford's personal life, whatever he does, his family, as long as he's getting respect from his family, that's all he cares about. As long as he has his kids and he's raising them right, he has his wife, that's all that matters. But when it comes to crossing into that line of the fight game, that's a different reputation. And to me, I'm like, if you want that reputation to be upheld, man, you just got to make sure you take on the fights that make sense. You know what I mean? Because like I said, win or lose, your family, they're going to be there for you. They're still going to love you. But when you're talking about the fight game, that reputation, when you want to be respected, you want to be in that Hall of Fame, you want to be respected by the legends, you got to take on these fights that make sense, you know? And that's where I was kind of disagreeing in the last video I saw of Roy Jones, where he was saying Errol Spence needs to beat Terrence Crawford to be number one. Not necessarily, not necessarily. As long as Errol stays on his path and he cleans the division out of the other three belts, and maybe if he got a Manny fight, and it depends on how he looks defeating Danny Garcia, and then maybe a Ugas, and then maybe getting a Thurman fight, I think he would be set. He'd be set as the number one welterweight for sure. But it's still on this side where Terrence, he needs more names. That's what I'm saying. A guy like Shawn Porter would really big his resume up, because Shawn is like the only guy in the division who's fought everybody. He's fought everybody. His last like 10, 12 fights with nothing but names, aside from Sebastian Formella, who he's getting harsh criticism for, he's always fought big names, and even then, Shawn, he deserved this. He deserved the time to kind of fine tune himself against somebody like Formella. It was still a young, durable, undefeated fighter. So, let him have that. Let him have his chance. I mean, other than that, he's been fighting nothing but the Broners, the Garcias, the Thurmans, the Brooks. He's been on that hard course for a while. So let him get his. Let him get his chance. So right there, just breaking that down, that's the reputation that Shawn holds to me and a lot of boxing fans. A lot of people might not like Shawn Porter's style, but Shawn has a reputation as a guy who fights anybody. He's fought anybody, win or lose, he's always coming back, and he never seems mentally broken. So you would want to fight with a guy like that. And when you're talking legacy too, again, man, you want to be respected amongst the legends. So you'd be like, yo, I got a Shawn Porter on my resume, and so on and so forth. You just kind of want to keep going up and up and up from there. Really, man, like I said, they really need to just make this fight happen. I feel like style-wise, this is a good test for Terrence Crawford. He's never fought a dog like Shawn Porter, that can mix it up. He's been boxing a lot. He's still been mixing in that pressure. He's been a little bit more disciplined and smarter with the pressure. So we really need to see where Terrence Crawford stands against a full-fledged welterweight of this caliber, because I think it would be a good fight. I think it could either be a good boxing match, or it could be a mauling match where, Terrence tries to meet him in the middle and trade with him a few times. And, Terrence got power. Terrence got power. That's why I'm not counting him out in this fight. I think it'll be a dog fight, but when it comes to clean precision punching, where you see a full reaction out of his opponents, Terrence is that guy. Terrence has that type of underrated power. Shawn, he's got a mixture of everything, where he's kind of just mauling and breaking you down, but he doesn't really necessarily have concussive power. But I feel like that long rangy jab and that snappy right hand, and even in the southpaw stance, that long range left hand that Bud has, that would make for a good combination in this fight. Imagine if he caught Shawn, or imagine like if Shawn just was like roughing Bud up for like 6-7 rounds, and let's see where he takes him. So it's just a lot of questions that need answering here. We haven't seen Bud in deep waters in the welterweight division yet. We haven't seen Shawn in the ring with we've seen him in there with, top caliber fighters, but we haven't seen him in with a cool, slick fighter like Bud, with this type of style. So it's a benefit for both guys. So really, man, Bob, Al, all these guys, just make the fight happen. Promoters and managers can only do so much, but we really need for Bud and Shawn Porter to be the ones to say, I want to fight him. That's how it needs to be. Bud needs to say, I want to fight Shawn. Shawn needs to say, I want to fight Bud. Bottom line, that's where it needs to come down to. So hopefully Shawn being the number one contender really, really, really makes this fight happen. Hopefully they don't take another mandatory. But yeah, man, moving on here. Udenis Ugas versus Abel Ramos this Sunday. We got this fight going down. This is for the WBA regular belt. First off, I got to say, shout out to Dennis Ugas. I'm glad he's finally getting the title shot here. You know, it's not the fighters he want, but it's for a vacant title, like I said. And with this vacant title, if everything goes the way he needs it to go, this fight is definitely going to build up Ugas' stock, and it'll put him where he needs to be. You know, Ugas is a fighter that, you know, he's been calling out everybody, you know, ever since he fought to a close, controversial loss to Shawn Porter. You know, he's been letting you know he wants the Shawn Porter rematch. He wants to fight Errol. You know, even before this, he wanted to fight Errol. But it's always just kind of, it's always been kind of the same for him. You know, everybody giving the same answer that he doesn't hold a lot of stock. You know, he doesn't really bring in numbers. He doesn't really bring in revenue. But to me, that's neither here nor there, man. I'm like, yo, the guy's tough. Give him a fight. You know, the guy's a challenge. Give him a fight. I think style-wise, he'd make a good fight with any of these guys, you know, whether it is Thurman, Crawford, or a rematch with Porter or Spence. You know, I think he's still a good, solid fighter that deserves all of these fights, you know, whether people know him or not. You know, that's how you get known, is whenever you get in there with the big guys and you give them a tough fight. That's why Ugas is partially on the map now, because of the Shawn Porter fight, you know. So I'm just glad that he's getting this fight now, because this fight will put him in that realm where nobody can turn him down. Now that he holds a belt, he holds something that Errol wants. He holds something that Keith Thurman wants. They'll want that fight, you know. But at the same time, you know, I understand where they are coming from too, because now that they have belts, somebody like Errol, he wants to just stay constantly in tough fights. You know, he wants to stay in there constantly trying to fully unify. So he's constantly calling out guys with belts like Pacquiao or Crawford. At the same time, they're big money fights. So, yeah, I can see where Errol's coming from there. So Ugas now, like when he wins this belt, he'll understand what Spence and even Thurman were kind of waiting on. You know, he'll kind of see, oh, okay, I'm in that realm now. I kind of see why they were waiting on this, because the checks are bigger now. You know, he'll see that the checks are bigger. You know, whenever depending on how he looks in this fight, he's going to see how many phone calls he starts getting now. You know, he's going to see, okay, now Shawn is calling me back. He wants this rematch. Oh, shoot, now Terrence wants to unify. He knows I got a belt, so now they calling me. I'm seeing more zeros on this check. So, you know, a lot of things are going to change for Ugas that he's going to start understanding now, whenever guys like Spence and Thurman start thinking more with the business mind, you know. But guys like Errol, they still not getting detached. You know, they got the business mind, but they also got the fighter mind. You know, I feel like Thurman, he's in that comfort mind right now. So you don't want to be fully like Thurman. You want to be more like Errol on that side, where you can juggle the business and the fighter a little bit better. So yeah, hopefully, man, like I said, if he comes away with this win, this will push him towards, you know, unification fights now, you know, which should be no problem, because he's on the PBC side with Errol. And, you know, depending on what Manny wants to do with his belt, you know, his belt might go vacant at some time, and it could put him in a Mikey Garcia fight, you know. So who knows? You know, that's just good news for Ugas all the way. Granted, he wins. But yeah, real quick, man, just looking at this fight coming up, I feel like Dennis Ugas versus Abel Ramos. This is a winnable fight for Ugas. I know Ugas, you know, the one thing I've noticed about him is he's a physically strong fighter, very slick on the inside. He doesn't really use too much slick footwork like some Cuban fighters, like the Lauras and the Rigondeaux, but I feel like he can stay in the pocket and touch you up and make you miss and make your output. He can make your punch output go down without having to go on the back foot a lot. He can stay right there in the pocket or at the mid-range and just piece you up and make you think twice about throwing. And that's what he was doing to Shawn a lot. You know, he was vicious to Shawn's body. And then he come back up top where Shawn had to just go. Shawn was going on the back foot, thinking about things, you know, rethinking about how to come in there with an offense against Ugas. So I feel like Ugas, he's got that offense that'll give a guy like Abel Ramos trouble. You know, Abel Ramos, I've seen a few of his fights in the past. He's a good pressure boxer, puncher, you know, but I think that Ugas, he kind of stands above him maybe like 2 or 3 levels. You know, I like the right hand from Ramos. I think if he goes into the pocket more and goes to Ugas's body, he'll have more success. You know, but if he tries to box from the outside against Ugas, I think I think he's too slow, and I think Ugas will be able to pick him apart. Ramos has a good right hand. I seen him in the Jamal James fight. You know, he had some good rough moments against Jamal James, but you know, of course, Jamal James, he's a much longer, rangier fighter, so he had better success against him. But I think against somebody like Ugas, who's physically stronger, I think he'll have a lot more trouble trying to tear somebody like Ugas down. So if I had to pick, of course, I'm going to go with Ugas by a unanimous decision. Ugas is a strong puncher, but he's not really like a knockout puncher. So I feel like he'll be able to break this guy down. But the one thing I'd say is a minus about Ugas is sometimes he doesn't fully level up to close the show. You know, if you go back to that Figueroa fight, man, he had Figueroa hurt, you know, but there were times like he should have just jumped on him, you know, went, you know, clubbing. He was clubbing Figueroa to the head a few times and, you know, just ripping the body. But Figueroa was still there, you know, and I think it was because he was telegraphing a lot of those strong shots and he wasn't really trying to set up a full on, you know, concussive counter. So I think that this fight will go the distance, mostly because of Ugas not really closing the show. So I think he'll pick Ramos apart, but there'll be moments where he could stop him, but I don't think he will fully stop him, you know. But if he does, you know, it'll be because, you know, Ramos won't be able to weather that storm from somebody like Ugas. But yeah, I'm going to go with Ugas by a unanimous decision in this fight. If not, you know, maybe around like 11th or 12th round TKO. But yeah, if he gets this belt, it'll be nothing but I won't say nothing but smooth sailing for Ugas, but he'll be getting somewhere. You know, he'll be definitely getting closer to an Errol Spence fight or a Shawn Porter rematch. But yeah, let me know in the comment section what y'all think. Who y'all got this Sunday, Ugas or Abel Ramos? All right, y'all. Last topic. As you know, Errol Spence Jr. versus Danny Garcia is going down November 21st. And of course, you know, until then, we're going to have a lot of trash talk from the Garcia camp. You know, we're going to have Danny being a lot more vocal. You know, Angel said his things about this fight as well. You know, Errol, he's going to have some words too. But right now, I see Errol kind of locking it down on Instagram with Jamel Charlo and Derek James in their camp for his upcoming fight. So I guess he's getting in work now, you know, so that's a good thing. But as you know, leading up to this one, you know, Danny, he's already been vocal about what he wants to do to Errol and why he's taking this fight. A few things I just want to talk about in this article that I seen. First statement that Danny made, I want to talk about with y'all. Kind of puts a question mark over my head. I think like a lot of people, like a lot of boxing fans. But Danny said this: even before the accident, I felt like the things I've seen in the Mikey Garcia fight, he's seeing things too. Like he sees something. He sees something like Mikey. But yeah, he said the things I've seen in the Mikey Garcia fight and the Porter fight, I felt like his style was great for my style. And before anything, I felt like I could take him. But I definitely feel like it's the right time. It's Danny Garcia's time. So right there, man, you know, I like Danny. You know, he seems like a cool guy. You know, he definitely puts on a good fight. But I'm wondering why now he feels like this is a good time. You know, does he feel like it took 2 other fighters to expose Errol for him to really start licking his chops? You know what I mean? Like, of course, he's not using the accident as an excuse to say, okay, I want to fight him now. He's been in an accident too. No, he said even before the accident, you know, much like Mikey, he's seen some things, seen things in the Mikey Garcia fight. I see things in the Shawn Porter fight that definitely makes him look beatable. Now I want to fight him. You know, because I know there was a time when Errol was calling him out pre-Mikey, pre-Porter, and Errol was calling Danny out, but Danny didn't seem to want to fight him then. You know what I mean? Like, it seems like Danny didn't really want to show any interest, and I wonder why. Was it because he didn't see those weaknesses in the Mikey fight yet? You know, he didn't see those weaknesses that Mikey and Porter, quote unquote, exposed? You know, what's making him want him now? Is it because he's damaged goods? And, you know, I got to say, like, Danny Garcia has great timing in the ring. but he also has solid timing outside of the ring as well too, you know, because you think about it, it still comes down to business moves. And I think that Danny Garcia, he knows when to fight certain people, you know what I mean? And that, I think that's why he feels like it's Danny Garcia's time. You know, I'm just being real, you know, because I think that the last few times he said he wasn't as hungry, like against Keith Thurman and against Shawn Porter, was because it was their time. They picked the fights. You know, it was like, you have no choice, so you got to fight us whenever we want. You know what I mean? So it was kind of like when he wasn't able to make the pick or make or have the ball in his court so much, that's when he comes up losing. But whenever it seems like he wants to be able to, he can kind of look at it and, you know, pick the timing and everything, it kind of falls in his favor. You know, whether it was some of the fighters he fought in the past, you know, from the former champions, you know, you could argue some of those other fights were all about his timing, when to take them, you know. But now, leading up to this Errol Spence fight, because like I said before, you know, there was really no talk of Danny really wanting Errol this bad. But now it seems like whenever he's seen Mikey and Porter do what they did, not so much Mikey, but Shawn do what he did against Errol, he's feeling like, I have a chance, you know. And to me, I said just kind of put a question mark over my head, because when it comes to boxing or any combat sport, it's one thing when you get in the ring and you expose a guy's weaknesses. You know, you say you want to go in there, you beat this guy, you want to beat him at your game, or you could beat him at his game, and you kind of expose a mental weakness in him or a physical weakness. That's what you do. That's how you become the winner. You overpower him to show you're stronger and he's weaker. But it's another thing, I think, when you're outside of the ring and you watch two other guys fight a guy that you didn't want to fight before, but then you see him looking like he shows weakness. So then that's your time to say, oh, I want to fight him. You know, I think that's kind of like two different things. I think that's two different things where you kind of wait for some other guy to tenderize him and leave him as damaged goods. Not saying Errol is damaged goods, but you're kind of getting the illusion that he is damaged goods. So now you want to fight him. You know, that's kind of what I'm getting out of what he's saying. Maybe not, you know, maybe he means something else, but that's kind of what I'm getting. Let me know in the conversation what y'all think. But from that statement where he says, I've seen the Mikey fight, I've seen the Porter fight, and now I feel like, you know, his style is great for me and I could take him. I felt like I could take him after seeing those fights, and I feel like it's the right time. Because to me, any time would have been right. If you want to fight anybody, hey, it's always fight time. You know, if you want the best at fighting the best. But it kind of seems like you picked the right time whenever Shawn Porter did his thing against Errol. You know what I mean? Like, I remember even after that fight, Danny Garcia, he came into the ring and he was ready to call Errol out. And of course, Errol, he was like, yo, the table's turned now. Now y'all want it. Now y'all calling me out. So I think it is one of those things, just like a little bit where you see weakness from outside of the ring, you want to go for it. But, you know, that kind of puts a question mark over, you know, where people are going to say, oh, now you're trying to, you know, look for damaged goods, which will kind of go into that category of cherry picking again. But Errol ain't no cherry pick, bro. I don't care what you think you see in him. You know, he's definitely not a cherry pick. But going on here, man, just another few things that I wanted to talk about as far as Danny had stated. You know, he also stated that he feels like he's a better fighter than Errol Spence. You know, he also stated he had more skill, more power, and more IQ than Errol Spence Jr. Now, looking at those three different categories, which I'm going to do a full-on breakdown of this fight. You know, I'm going to go back and watch plenty of their fights, and then I'm going to do my breakdown and keys to victory and my prediction leading up to this fight. Of course, I'm going to do that. But just looking at the categories that he mentioned, you know, he said he's more skilled, he's more powerful, he's got more of an IQ. I don't fully agree with that, man. I mean, I know he's fought more champions, he's fought more names, but again, it comes down to timing, which is where I was kind of getting to. Some of those guys, were already out of their prime that Danny Garcia's fought. And you got to remember that was a lower weight. That was at 140. So you got to say, okay, these guys are not going to pose the same threat as a young, fresh, powerful lion in Errol Spence. A Zab Judah or Paulie Malignaggi or Eric Morales, they're not necessarily going to pose that same threat as a guy like a Errol Spence Jr. who, holds 2 belts now and has that skill to be a potential undisputed champion or potential Hall of Famer himself. You know what I mean? So when it comes down to skill, Danny's skill versus Errol Spence's skill, I feel like Errol has more skill. You can disagree or not, but I feel like Errol, he has more skill and discipline with what he does to get his wins. I mean, Danny has a lot of power and he's used great skill to get his wins as well. But I feel like Errol always takes advantage of he always takes advantage of his strengths, and he always takes advantage of his opponent's weaknesses. When he sees certain people are hurt with with shots to the body, or if they can't take a pressure style, he goes in on you. He's constantly going in on you. He has a good solid jab. He has a good straight left hand. It's not all power based with him. If he hurts you, that's a plus. But other than that, he's still kind of going through the motions of making sure his technique is right. If you go back and look at the skill he showed against Mikey Garcia, Mikey Garcia, like I said, he's a basic guy, but he does all the basics to a T that makes him a solid pound for pound guy. And Errol Spence was able to take apart this pound for pound guy. You know what I mean? Skill for skill. He didn't go in there and try to close the show. He let Mikey stay in there for 12 rounds to see if Mikey could show the world that something that he's seen. But Mikey was never able to show the world, I see what I see that's going to help me beat Errol Spence. Errol Spence gave him 12 rounds to do it, but Errol had too much skill for him. He couldn't handle it. So I think when it comes down to pure skill, I think that I have to go with Errol Spence just off top. I have to say that he has more so of a better punch variety and more discipline when it comes to boxing. He doesn't go too wild. He keeps a cool head when it comes to the work inside, as far as his inside fighting, his boxing from the outside. It's all patient. It's all patient. And the way he turns his punches over, much nicer, much cleaner. But Danny has skill. He has that Philly skill too. He has a lot of boxing skill that's pulled him through tough fights like Matisse, guys like Zab Judah, and Ivan Redcatch for even 12 rounds with him. He was able to do some certain things, and even stopping Adrian Granados, a swarmer, a pressure fighter like him. He was able to throw some nice counters in there. So he's definitely a nice counter puncher. He definitely has skill, especially, when people always talk about him being flat-footed. No, like Danny is flat-footed for a reason. He does that to keep his balance and throw solid, hard power shot. So yeah, he has skill. Danny definitely has skill, but I think that Errol's skill is a little bit more polished and can deal with a wide variety of styles. Power department, I'm going to go with Danny in power. I can agree with Danny there. I feel like Danny does have the power because, again, the way Danny places his feet and the way he throws his body into his shots, that's what he's going for. That's his style. He wants to knock people out, whether he's throwing that left hand or that overhand right, he's trying to close the show, and again, the way he's keeping his balance, the way he's moving his feet, that's the type of punches he wants to throw. And that's the type of what's the word I want to say? Results he wants. Yeah, that's the type of result he wants, and that's what he's getting. So I'd say I definitely give him the power edge. But Errol Spence is definitely not that far off. Like, I'm sure if he started placing his feet a little bit flatter and started throwing the same way with that much intensity, Errol could get that much power off too, because he's a naturally hard hitter, a much bigger guy. He's about 1.5 inches or 2 inches taller than Danny Garcia, and definitely holds a lot of power at the end of the shot. he has longer reach too. So I'm just kind of thinking how he kind of flings those straight left hands out. He does pack a lot of power too. He controls this a little bit more. That goes back to skill again. Errol is a little bit more disciplined with his power. That's why I say that it takes a lot of skill to be disciplined too. So I say he holds more skill than Danny because he knows how to control his power. But yeah, Danny definitely does have the power because that's the type of style he goes for. So I give him that edge. But when it comes down to IQ, it's almost even, but I might go with Errol by an edge because, again, like I feel like his skill really ties into his IQ as far as, his ability to make adjustments and show more styles. I think that Errol has shown more styles and more style changes than Danny Garcia has. Danny Garcia, a good counter puncher, good slick counter puncher, good hard knockout puncher. He's kind of been that same fighter throughout all of his fights, and I think that's what makes him win, but also makes him lose. Whereas Errol, I've seen him box a little bit. You've seen him fight on the inside. You see him be a dog. You've seen him be a pressure fighter in all the different moments because he's adjusting to whatever the fighters bring. So I think that Errol has the edge in IQ too. I think he has the edge in IQ, and I think that's what's going to help him, pull through a Danny fight. I think that's definitely what's going to help him. But a lot of people, man, they're feeling like this fight is close. They're feeling like Danny can cause an upset, but I'm not too sure. Like, of course, when you're hearing all that talk and, Danny saying he's back, this and that, I'm going to, show, his style is made for me. I don't know about that, man. Like, I was just looking back at this Lamont Peterson fight, as part of my, as part of my analysis. I was just looking at it an hour ago, and I'm like, I don't know, man. I really don't know because, Lamont Peterson, some of the stuff he was doing, I just imagine, like, if Errol was doing that, Errol might be able to get a stoppage, man. So, more and more I look at it, I'm like, I don't know if he does have enough tools to stop somebody like Errol Spence or really hurt Errol Spence. I think people look at a lot of these fights at 140, and they're thinking that, oh man, he's gonna knock Errol Spence out. I don't know about that. Errol's a big boy too. Errol gets big. Errol has a pretty high punch resistance. He's very, very durable. So the more and more you look at it, the fight's definitely kind of going in Errol's favor. And yeah, like I said, I'll be breaking that down as we get closer to this one. But yeah, that's why I got to say, I feel like the skill and the IQ, they go to Errol Spence just because I see more variety from him, more discipline, and I see him find more ways to win. And that's what's kept him going in the welterweight division. He's been in the welterweight division longer than Danny Garcia. And I feel like some of the opponents that Errol's beat, Danny Garcia, he wouldn't be able to beat him. Even guys like Kell Brook. I think Kell Brook, he's a strong fighter, and what Errol was able to do to Kell Brook after some rough competitive moments, he made some proper adjustments with discipline and skill until he broke him down. You know what I mean? So that's something that Danny Garcia has to be prepared for, his ability to adjust. So yeah, skill and IQ, they go to Errol Spence, but power definitely goes to Danny. I definitely give him that. But let me know in the comment section, guys, what y'all think. But yeah, man, that's all I got on this one, y'all. Like I said, just want to revisit the welterweight division. Just my wrap up, my final thoughts. Like I said, Terrence Crawford, Shawn Porter, that's a much needed fight. I'm glad he's the number one contender for that WBO belt. He's also number one contender, I guess, for the WBC and IBF. That Sebastian Formella fight was a title eliminator. So, Shawn Porter right now, he's in good standing with all these sanctioned bodies, and somebody's got to give him a fight because he's always holding his own. But yeah, I just think that the Crawford Porter fight really needs to happen, more so for Crawford's sake. Crawford got to get his reputation back in a good standing with a lot of people. Like I said, I think Crawford is a very skillful fighter, but you need opponents to back his skill up. And yeah, Ugas versus Ramos. Like I said, I'm going with Dennis Ugas. Shout out to Ugas. He's got him a WBA title. shot coming up. And last topic, Danny Garcia. Danny Garcia is gonna have his hands full, man, because right now, Errol, he's got the edge in skill and IQ. Danny's got the puncher's chance. He's got that power. But yeah, like I always say, guys, make sure y'all subscribe to my YouTube channel, Combo Breaker 99, as well as the Jab Effect, where I post segments of this episode of CB99 Talks, all boxing, everything. Follow me on Instagram. I post all that here. All that info goes right there, man. But I'm going to be checking out some women's MMA fights. Going to be doing some predictions on some fights coming up this weekend. And drop on back with some women's MMA topics for y'all. Combo Breaker 99. Make sure y'all subscribe. I'm out. Peace.